If this video has reached you, it means you're seeking a change in your life, an improvement, or even to understand yourself and the people around you. And so, start the change right now by influencing your profile's algorithm. Like this video, comment on your thoughts and what changes you hope to see in your life. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel so YouTube recommends more transformative and enlightening videos to you. This way, you'll truly witness the change and improvement in your daily life. Love is a mystery that has intrigued humanity since time immemorial. We constantly wonder, what does it mean to love? How do we know if someone truly loves us? And most importantly, how do we interpret their actions when they seem contradictory, especially when someone we love ignores us? Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, left us profound teachings about the human psyche and the dynamics of love. From his perspective, love is not just a feeling, but an interaction between the conscious and the unconscious, between what we know about ourselves and what remains hidden in our shadows. If you've ever wondered why someone who claims to love you sometimes seems to ignore you, know that the answer lies not in the superficiality of actions, but in what hides behind them. Not everything that appears as rejection is genuine disinterest. In many cases, it's a deep psychological process that even the person themselves doesn't fully understand. For Jung, the unconscious guides many of our actions without our awareness. When someone ignores or withdraws from you, it isn't always because they don't care. Instead, they might be struggling with something within themselves. Love confronts us with our own vulnerability. Jung explained that when a person encounters such a profound feeling, their psyche may react unexpectedly. There could be an unconscious desire to connect, but at the same time, a deep-rooted fear pushing them away. This fear may stem from past wounds, a childhood where affection was conditional, or experiences that left scars on the soul. This is why some people, when they begin to develop genuine feelings, react with distance as a defense mechanism to avoid the pain their unconscious associates with attachment. If you've ever felt that someone with whom you shared a special connection suddenly started ignoring you, don't automatically assume the love has faded. Sometimes love is so strong that it awakens shadows within the psyche that the person doesn't know how to handle. Jung said that what we deny in ourselves doesn't disappear, it manifests in our relationships. When someone battles their own shadow, they may project that struggle onto the person they care about most. In other words, the act of ignoring isn't always a declaration of disinterest, but a reflection of an internal conflict the person doesn't know how to resolve. It's hard to accept, but often those who ignore us aren't running from us, they're running from themselves. True love acts as a mirror, showing us who we truly are, with all our light and shadows. Some people aren't ready to face that reflection. Instead of looking inward and confronting what love reveals, they choose to withdraw. This isn't a conscious decision, but an impulse born from the depths of their unconscious. Jung taught that love can be the catalyst for internal transformation, but this transformation doesn't happen without resistance. The ego, the part of us that seeks to protect us from pain, can sabotage the deepest connections out of fear of the unknown. When someone ignores you after showing interest, their ego might be reacting to the fear of total surrender that love demands. The mind seeks control, but love, by its very nature, is an act of surrender. It's important to understand that everyone has their own internal process, and not everyone is at the same level of emotional awareness. Some people feel comfortable surrendering to love without reservations, while others struggle with the idea of letting go completely. Genuine love demands vulnerability, and not everyone is willing to expose themselves emotionally. If you've ever wondered why someone who seemed so connected to you suddenly became indifferent, remember that love isn't just a feeling. It's a deep psychological process that awakens aspects of our psyche that may have been dormant or repressed. Some people need time to process what they're feeling, to reconcile what love is stirring within them. It's not always rejection, but a moment of introspection where they need to make peace with their own fears and shadows before they can fully commit. The unconscious has mysterious ways of manifesting in our relationships. Sometimes the distance someone takes is an unconscious test to see if the love is real. Jung spoke of how the human soul constantly seeks certainty in an uncertain world. Some people need to verify that love isn't fleeting, that the connection is strong enough to withstand distance. While this doesn't justify harmful behavior, it helps us understand that love is a play of internal forces far beyond what we see on the surface. If you're in a situation where someone special seems to withdraw or ignore you, instead of reacting with pain or frustration, try to observe the situation from a deeper perspective. Ask yourself, what might be happening within this person's psyche? Not as an excuse, but as a way to understand that love isn't always linear. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is giving space for the other to resolve their own internal process. True love isn't possession, control, or an immutable guarantee. Jung taught that love is a journey of self-discovery and growth, and sometimes that journey includes moments of silence, distance, and introspection. But if the love is real, if the connection is genuine, then even in absence, there is presence. What is true will always find its way back. When someone who claims to love you withdraws without explanation, the first reaction is often to seek answers on the surface. What did I do wrong? What did I say? Was there a mistake that caused the distance? But rarely do we stop to consider that the real answer lies not externally, but within that person's inner world. Jung taught that our actions and decisions are often driven by forces we don't fully understand. What seems like a conscious choice is often just the manifestation of something deeper moving in the shadows. If he loves you and ignores you, instead of seeing it as an act of disinterest, look at what's happening within him. Real love awakens something inside us that we aren't always ready to face. It can reveal childhood wounds, insecurities we thought we'd overcome, or even the fear of losing control. For many, to love is to expose oneself, to risk being hurt. Not everyone is ready to take that risk, even if the feeling is genuine. Often, ignoring isn't rejection, but an unconscious attempt to regain control. Jung explained that the ego fears what it cannot handle, and authentic love is one of the most uncontrollable forces. For some, falling in love means losing independence, ceasing to be who they are. The ego reacts with defense mechanisms, one of the most common being distance. Withdrawing is a way to avoid feeling something too deep, too powerful, something that could change how they perceive their own identity. Love brings out the best and worst in everyone. Jung said that what bothers us most about others is a reflection of what we deny in ourselves. When someone withdraws from you, it's often because something in you reflects a part of themselves they aren't ready to accept. If he feels he's becoming too vulnerable or open with you, his unconscious might push him to retreat, not because he doesn't care, but because the relationship is confronting him with aspects of himself he'd rather avoid. This explains why those who love us most sometimes hurt us with their indifference. They don't want to cause pain, but love places them in an internal battle where their emotions and fears clash in an invisible arena. They aren't always aware of what's happening. They simply feel an internal pressure driving them away. Sometimes, they even seek logical excuses to justify their behavior. But the truth is, the root of their withdrawal lies at a much deeper level. When someone who loves you begins to ignore you, it's natural to want answers. We look for signs, analyze their words and actions, even resort to strategies to get their attention. But the reality is, there's nothing external you can do to change another person's internal process. Jung taught that each individual is on their own psychological journey, and we can't force someone to confront their shadow before they're ready. Love can't be forced. Awareness can't be imposed. We can only allow each person to follow their process at their own pace. The hardest truth to accept is that sometimes love isn't enough to keep someone close. Not because the feeling isn't real, but because love implies growth and transformation, and not everyone is ready to undergo that process. For Jung, the purpose of love isn't possession or absolute security, but the evolution of the self. A relationship can be the catalyst for awakening, but each person decides whether they're willing to go through it. If he loves you but withdraws, ask yourself, what does this distance represent in his inner world? You might be touching a part of him that hasn't healed, an aspect of his psyche he fears facing. Perhaps he's realized that being with you requires a level of emotional honesty he isn't prepared for. Jung said the unconscious never lies. It always places us in situations that show us what we need to learn. Maybe this situation isn't just about him, but also about you. Perhaps the true message of this distance isn't about what he's feeling, but what you need to discover about yourself. Love is a mirror. It shows us who we are, what we fear, and what we need to heal. If someone ignores you, don't just see the act itself. See what that act reflects in you. Ask yourself, why does their absence hurt so much? Why do you need their validation to feel complete? Jung believed the greatest trap in love is seeking in others what we can only find within ourselves. When we depend on someone else to feel loved, we surrender our power, letting our happiness depend on something we can't control. Authentic love isn't a game of strategies or emotional manipulation. It's not about who ignores more or shows less interest. It's a process of self-discovery, evolution, and integration of our shadow. Sometimes the best response to someone's indifference isn't to beg or prove your worth, but to observe, without judgment, expectations, or the need for immediate answers. Often, distance isn't the end, but a pause on the journey. If he truly loves you, he'll eventually face his fears and find his way back. If he doesn't, the lesson his absence leaves will be more valuable than any relationship you could have had. Because true love isn't what holds you with fear. It's what frees you with confidence. Love confronts us with our essence in a way few experiences can. It's not a fleeting emotion, but a force that exposes what we've hidden, illuminates the dark corners of our psyche, and forces us to see what we don't want to see. So when someone who loves you withdraws, it isn't always a conscious act of disinterest, but a response to a deep-seated fear awakened by love. Jung explained that the unconscious governs most of our actions. Much of what we do isn't truly decided by us, but is the manifestation of impulses, wounds, and internal conflicts we don't fully comprehend. Love is a territory where the unconscious becomes more visible than ever. In relationships, projections, traumas, and buried memories emerge. Everything we've tried to avoid. When someone falls in love, they aren't just facing the present, but also their past, their fears, losses, and wounds. All of this resurges in a way that doesn't happen in other areas of life. When the mind feels overwhelmed by emotions it doesn't know how to handle, the natural reaction is to flee. This is why many people, when they start feeling something real, distance themselves. It's not that love doesn't exist. It's too intense to manage at that moment. Some have spent their lives repressing emotions, building armor to protect themselves from pain. They've learned not to depend on anyone, to control their environment, to stay closed off. But love breaks all these barriers. When someone touches us deeply, the ego's strategies no longer work. There's no plan to guarantee we won't be hurt. Real love makes us vulnerable, and not everyone is ready for that. Jung explained that what we avoid doesn't disappear. It hides in our shadow and ends up dominating us. Convincing oneself they can move forward without confronting their feelings only fuels an internal conflict that will eventually manifest in other ways. Anxiety, dissatisfaction, or an unexplainable emptiness. What we repress doesn't vanish. It changes form and haunts us unpredictably. If he withdraws but you feel the love remains, don't try to force him to stay. No one can be forced to face their fears before they're ready. The only thing you can do is understand that his distance isn't a reflection of you, but of his own internal process. It's not your responsibility to fix what isn't ready to heal or wait indefinitely for someone to resolve their conflicts. What you can do is observe what this situation is teaching you. Relationships not only reveal the other's inner world, but also our own shadows, wounds, and attachments. When someone you love ignores you, the question shouldn't be, how do I make them come back? But what is this experience teaching me about myself? Maybe you're discovering that you've based your worth on external validation, that you only feel deserving of love if it's shown in a specific way. Perhaps you're realizing that fear of abandonment has driven your relationships, making you cling to people who aren't ready to give what you need. Jung said self-knowledge is the only path to true freedom. When you understand why you react as you do, when you stop acting from lack, and start acting from awareness. You're no longer a prisoner of past patterns. You no longer need to beg for love or fear absence, because you realize true love isn't found outside. It's in your relationship with yourself. Love not rooted in consciousness becomes a battlefield where fear and insecurity dominate. The person who withdraws isn't running from you, but from the image of themselves reflected in the relationship. If, instead of taking it personally, you understand that everyone is on their own evolutionary path, you free yourself from the burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. True love isn't a power struggle, negotiation, or constant fight for attention. It's a meeting of two souls ready to see each other truly, without masks, fears, or barriers. Jung spoke of synchronicity, how people enter our lives for a reason, how every experience is an opportunity to learn what our soul needs. If someone entered your life and then left, ask yourself, what lesson did their presence leave? Not all loves are meant to stay, but all loves leave a mark. If you're feeling the void of absence, maybe it's time to fill it with something greater than waiting for their return. Perhaps it's time to reconnect with yourself, look inward, and discover what part of you needs healing before you can experience love, free of fear and uncertainty. The answer isn't out there, not in what the other does or doesn't do, not in whether they return. The answer is always within you, in how you interpret this experience, what you learn from it, and what it reveals about yourself. It's not about why they left, but about what changes in you because of their absence. When you learn to let go without resentment, to stop clinging to what isn't meant to be, and to trust that everything happens for a reason, love stops being suffering and becomes growth. If he truly loves you, he'll find his way back. If he doesn't, it doesn't mean you're unworthy of love. It means his role in your life was to teach you something. Once you understand the lesson, once you stop seeking external answers and start looking within, you'll discover that the person you truly needed to find has always been there, yourself. When someone you love withdraws without explanation, the first thing we feel is emptiness and uncertainty, driving us to seek answers. But the mind tends to look for surface solutions, rarely considering the deeper currents moving in the person's unconscious. Jung said everything we do in life is influenced by what we don't know about ourselves, the invisible forces governing us from the shadows. So when someone ignores you or disappears without reason, it's not a conscious decision, but the manifestation of an internal conflict awakened by the relationship. Authentic love isn't just emotion, it's confrontation. It forces us to see ourselves in the other, to face parts of our psyche we've repressed or denied. Not everyone is ready for this. Some people spend their lives avoiding introspection, distracting themselves with external control, independence, or the idea that they'll never need anyone. But love dismantles all these barriers. You can't love without exposing yourself, without letting the other see what you've tried to hide. When someone unready to be seen this way finds themselves in a relationship that reveals parts of themselves they don't want to acknowledge, the common reaction is to withdraw. Not because they don't love, but because they don't know how to handle what love brings to light. Jung explained that people don't truly relate to others, but to the projections they've built in their minds. When you fall in love, what you love is the image you've created, a representation of your desires, expectations, and emotional needs. But as time passes and the relationship deepens, this idealized image crumbles, revealing reality, the person as they are, with flaws, wounds, and contradictions. This can be terrifying. Many aren't prepared to be loved wholly because it means accepting imperfection, shortcomings, and the end of pretending self-sufficiency. At this point, some choose the easier path, ignoring, withdrawing, disappearing. The most painful part of being ignored isn't the absence itself, but the uncertainty, not knowing what the connection truly meant or why someone so present suddenly left. This lack of answers can become an obsession, but Jung taught that the human mind isn't designed to find all answers externally, but internally. It's not about why they left, but about what part of you their absence has affected. When you identify this, you stop seeking outside what can only be resolved within. Love is a process of self-discovery, a mirror reflecting our light and shadows. What hurts most when someone ignores you isn't the distance, but what that distance reveals about you. Jung believed the unconscious speaks through our experiences. Every emotionally conflicting situation is an opportunity to learn about our psyche. So instead of asking why they left, ask, what is their absence showing you about yourself? Why does it hurt? Why do you need their presence to feel complete? What part of you has tied your worth to another's attention? The ego seeks external answers because it doesn't want to face the true root of the problem. It wants to believe that if the other returns, all will be well, that a logical explanation will let us move forward. But the truth is, the problem is never the other person, but what their departure has stirred within us. Healing doesn't come when they return, but when we understand why their absence affected us as it did. When we stop seeking outside and start looking inward, something shifts. The wound stops being a burden and becomes a teacher, a chance to grow, learn, and discover who we truly are without depending on others to feel whole. Often, the greatest act of love isn't fighting for someone's presence, but allowing their absence to transform us. Love isn't possession, a test of endurance, or a battle to see who yields first. True love doesn't need strategies, games, or constant displays of interest. It's a meeting of two souls ready
to see and accept each other as they are. If someone withdraws or ignores you, maybe it's not because they don't love you, but because they don't yet love themselves enough to sustain the love they feel for you. In this case, all you can do is let go, not as resignation, but as trust that everything happens with purpose, even absence. Real love isn't a chase, emotional manipulation, or living in uncertainty. It's a reflection of our inner state. When someone leaves without explanation, the real
question isn't why they did it, but what this experience is teaching you about yourself. Ultimately, everything in life is a reflection, an opportunity to see ourselves truly, to understand what part of us still seeks external validation instead of finding it within. Jung taught that what most affects us about others' behavior is, deep down, a reflection of our own shadow. If someone's indifference causes anxiety or despair, it's because something inside you needs healing. Until you do this inner work, you'll keep attracting situations that force you to confront it. The hardest truth is that love doesn't always mean permanence. Sometimes, the people who impact us most are those who leave, teaching us the value of letting go without resentment or needing answers. Not all loves are meant to stay, but all play a role in our growth. When you release the idea that love must follow a specific script, you free yourself. You realize the love that matters isn't what ties you to another's uncertainty, but what returns you to yourself. If someone you love is ignoring you, if you feel the weight of absence and confusion, breathe. Don't desperately seek answers where there are none. Don't try to resolve what isn't yours to fix. Instead, observe what this situation is showing you about yourself. Ask, what part of you has been seeking love externally? What fear is this void revealing? What can you learn to avoid repeating patterns? Real love isn't about changing others, but changing how we relate to ourselves. When you act from consciousness instead of lack, everything changes. You stop begging for love, stop feeling incomplete without someone. And in that moment, when you no longer seek love out of need, real love arrives. Not because you chased it, but because you've learned to hold it without fear. Love isn't about waiting for someone to choose you. It's about choosing yourself first. When you do this, truly do this, everything in your life begins to change.